approach to coaching. So I'm more than happy to try to share some different ideas, and if hopefully there's something that you can pick up here that you might take to your own programs, or some thought processes that you might appreciate. But yeah, I'll get going, because you're going to be sick of hearing me talk sooner than later. But today what I'm going to be covering is tight and inside zone, and a common misconception of what we think of the two. So Aaron went through this. I don't really need to cover it, but what are we really talking about? So there is a common misconception, I believe, about the difference between tight zone and mid zone. Everybody seems to think, or a lot of people seem to call mid zone a tight zone concept, where it's not quite tight zone. But what we're going to be covering at the beginning is the difference between the two, whether they both have their merits, in my opinion, what kind of techniques we're using, and whether they're the same or how they differ, and why and when you might want to use them, or what might be the difference between the two. The other things that we need to also keep in mind when we're talking about them is the way that you can be multiple. And what I mean by that is you can have a bunch of different looking plays, although it's the same play, based upon formation and running back alignment. When my first year at Simon Fraser University, although we went 2-9 and got our butts kicked for the most part, we were still third in the GNAC conference in total yardage. And a lot of that was because, especially in the American game, defenses don't know how to adjust to multiple formations and motions. That's one of the big things that we can take advantage of in the Canadian game, is by moving guys around. Even at a young age, it's not necessarily that difficult to put in basic motions where one guy is moving from one place to another or flopping sides. It just gives you way more abilities to be able to create advantages in the box. And in the run game, that's what you're looking for. You're looking to create mismatches and how you can attack the defense and defense's weak points. And again, another way that we can do it is through running back alignment. Now, when I talk about running back alignment, I stay generally with 3 types of alignment, and I'm specifically going to be talking about 2 of them in this conversation. The 3 types of alignment that I use, I call the 1, 2, and 3 alignments. The 1 alignment is your traditional I alignment, where the running back is 3.5 yards behind the quarterback's heels. The 2 alignment is where the running back is offset to the play side. So he is 1.5 yards behind the quarterback, foot to foot with the play side guard. Now this is, to the defense, it honestly looks, the 2 and 3 alignment look the same, because there isn't really that much difference, especially from depth. The difference is with the 3 alignment, it's always backside, and the running back's toes are in line with the quarterback's heels, where his belt buckle is in the backside B gap. So basically in between the guard and the tackle backside. So when you think of that traditional offset alignment for your zone reads and your RPOs, where the running back is coming from the backside to the front side, that's what the 3 alignment is. Now also we're going to be talking about the difference between a bend and a belly concept. A brief look into it to introduce the concept is, First, the footwork and the launch point for the running back differ for those plays. The belly has the running back moving with the O-line. So, in other words, if you've got a tight zone going to the right, all of the O-linemen are going to the right, the running back's initial launch point and aiming point take him with the O-line, and then he attacks into the line of scrimmage. In my opinion, they're great for hard runs and naked boots. And what I mean by hard runs are runs where there's no read by the quarterback. There's always some sort of backside edge control with a tight end or an H-back, or you're bringing a slot back in to block the backside D end, but it's a guaranteed run. There's no thought process about it. The ball's being handed off. As well for naked boots, because you like the ability of the quarterback to be able to fake open towards the side and boot nakedly behind him. The bend is the opposite. The running back adjusts his aiming point and initial launch point away from the flow of the O-line. Meaning, again, if we've taken that example where the O-line is moving to the right, the running back's first initial 2 steps are basically left to make the quarterback open up to the backside. So it's really good for RPO, zone reads. It can be for runs with hard runs with backside edge control. But it's also, it gives you that look of where the quarterback is reading the backside D end. So here are our differences. So the major differences between tight zone and mid zone is the launch aiming point for the running back. So what's important to understand is that mid zone, in my belief, is a B gap to backside B gap entry point. Tight zone is an A gap to backside A gap entry point. And it all starts with the initial aiming point for the running back. Now, how we accomplish that and getting to his aiming point is it's all based on footwork through the mesh point. But the initial aiming point and how the running back wants to set his hips for tight zone is all is all predicated on the inside butt cheek of the play side guard. The aiming point for the running back and how he sets his hips for mid zone, although it's only subtle, it is a big difference, but it's the outside butt cheek of the play side guard. Now again, not that different when you're talking about a 2-foot wide ass, but it can be drastic. So what I want you to have in your heads is the difference on how the running back's hips open to his aiming point, tight zone versus mid zone, and how that affects not necessarily just the D lineman, but how that really affects the linebackers and how that moves the linebackers. That, in a nutshell, is the complete, or the difference between mid zone and tight zone, is how we affect the linebackers. Now, the running back footwork also varies for the first 3 steps depending on alignment and aiming point. What's important is that you want to time up your first 3 steps for the running back, need to time up with the first 4 steps of the O-line. Now, those first 3 steps of the running back take him into the mesh with the QB. And always remember that it's up to the quarterback to find the running back, not the running back to find the quarterback. Although I know that there's a lot of controversy with this, but when you're asking the running back to go through his read progression, he always has to have his eyes into the line of scrimmage. And that's why it's important that the quarterback needs to establish the proper width and find the running back. Even if he's working zone read. That's why it's so important for you guys to practice your mesh on a daily basis. So again, the key to the running back footwork is to make sure that the O-line is taking their first 4 steps when the running back is executing his first 3 steps into the mesh with the QB. Now, how that's established, the first thing that needs to go through the thought process is that the running back cannot establish or start his footwork until the quarterback has caught the snap. If he starts any earlier, it doesn't time up right. So that's the first thing that we need to talk about and execute. The other important things are that the O-line stays the same except for the center. And that's the difference between tight zone and mid zone. Now, for both tight zone and mid zone, schematically, you can still design either as hard runs or RPOs or zone reads. The difference is going to be kind of an offensive thought process and philosophy, but you can, and I'm going to say this about any philosophy, regardless of whether it's mine or someone else's, as long as you believe in it and can teach it and teach it effectively, it doesn't necessarily matter what you're coaching or what you believe in. As long as you've got something to hang your hat on and you can coach the hell out of it, it's still going to be successful. So why is it important for us to know the difference when we're talking about tight and mid zone? Again, I mentioned this earlier, but mid zone and tight zone affect the linebackers and D-line differently, and they hit at slightly different times into the line of scrimmage. Mid zone is not wide zone, although to the linebackers, it does look pretty darn close to wide zone. And it stretches the D-lines and linebackers a lot more than tight zone. Again, it hits a touch later. And the reason why I really like mid-zone, especially in the last couple years, more than tight zone, is because it allows your more athletic offensive linemen to use what God's been gifted them. It allows them to use their athletic ability to get into the second level with a little bit more time. And the unfortunate part is whether we as offensive linemen like it or not, linebackers are way better athletes than us. So they're going to make us look stupid unless we set spacing and aiming points and dictate space the right way. So I'm fully in favor of mid-zone being one of those plays that allows your athletic O-linemen to use their natural gifts and be athletes. For tight zone, I believe it's way more of a downhill run. It hits a lot quicker than mid-zone. And I believe it's, in my opinion, it's designed for more road grading inside offensive linemen. So your inside 3, your center, guard, and tackle, or center and both guards, if you've got 3 road graders in there that can just beat the tar out of people, you don't necessarily need to worry about going into kind of a mid-zone concept because you've got 3 war daddies that can just beat the hell out of the people in front of them. If you've got guys that aren't necessarily that, then mid-zone might be something that's a little more user-friendly from an athletic standpoint. But again, it's all thought process. Now, do both of these schemes have merit? I believe they both bring their own upside to a run scheme. And again, neither is wrong if you believe in it and can coach it. I believe tight zone is better for quicker hitting, hard downhill runs for your 2 to 4 yard down and distances. You know, if you want to convert to first down, then we're going to go right at them and try to hit it early and just move the sticks. I have seen on film, and I'm a full believer that that tight zone really brings your linebackers downhill. Because of the aiming point of the back, it's not quite as wide. And really his hips are more downhill than angled as if it was wide zone. So for the linebackers, it freezes them in place and brings them downhill. So again, for your low grading inside three, that's great. It freezes those guys. It allows you to beat the tar out of a nose guard on a double team and work vertically to the first spot linebackers in the box and really get a hat on a hat early. Schematically, tight zone, as I briefly just talked about, it commits the center on a double, in my opinion. It commits the center on a double team with versus a four down front. It commits them to the backside two eye, where we always want to double team the nose at the point of attack to create, again, vertical run lanes. That's another one of those reasons why tight zone hits quicker, is because that tight zone or that double team on a nose guard is difficult to maintain for long periods. So that's another reason why it's got to hit a little bit quicker. That double team creates a larger A gap, creating a quicker cutback for the back if need be. And again, it's a great play for road grading inside three. Mid zone, again, can look like wide zone or stretch to the linebackers because of the running back's aiming point and how he opens up his hips through the mesh point. This creates a ton of flow for your linebackers and even your D linemen, and I'll get into how that is created in a little bit. Flow allows our more athletic interior three to be able to cover ground and play to their strengths. Mid zone will put the center play side always, as opposed to backside versus a 2-eye. Now he's going to go play side towards the 3-tech. So imagine if you can, we've got a 4-down front in front of us. We've got a 3-tech over our right guard and a 2-eye over our left guard. Tight zone will have the center take his first 2 steps way more shallow in the A gap, looking to rewind and double team the 2-eye. Although this is pure zone and his eyes and hips are basically committed to the front side in case we get a 3-tech spike or the mic comes down into the A gap, he's committing his body to the backside 2-eye. Again, that creates downhill flow for both the interior D linemen as well as the linebackers. Now they're in mid zone versus the same front, the center will commit himself front side to the 3-tech, leaving the backside 2-eye on an island with the left guard in this case. And how we do that, or how I coach it, is I have the center take what I call a brace drag. Basically, it's just a flat kick along the line of scrimmage. It allows him to be able to cover the A gap, although with there being that hole in the A gap with a front side 3-tech, and work to either push climb, double team, or just to push or rewind onto the 2-eye and get vertical onto the mic. But what we know about defenses, if they're playing it honest and not run stunting, the vast majority of defenses are gap cancellation type defenses. So if we're concentrating or just focusing on what we know about the 2-eye, and if he's backside A gap responsible, if the center brace drags and leaves the backside A gap, that creates a massive lane for the backside 2-eye to flow through. Now also, D linemen won't just be gap conscious, they're also going to read hat read. So again, as the center leaves, that 2i is going to want to fill that gap naturally, just in case something comes in to fill it. And he's also got to be gap conscious. So the more that we extend the A gap, the more that the backside 2i's technique for filling that gap works against him when we're running mid zone, because he gets in a hurry and tries to fill that gap aggressively, which allows the techniques of the backside guard to drive him through the A gap into the front side B gap, because the momentum of the defensive lineman is already taking him there. Now, the reason why that's so important, and we cover this in a little bit, but 94 to 96% of tight zone or inside zone or mid zone runs cut back behind the backside guard into the backside B gap. So my belief with that is encourage that backside cutback with technique and game plan. Make it easier for the back to go there if it's going to go there the vast majority of the time anyway. Again, mid-zone gives the running back more movement and more time to be able to determine what his read and reaction keys are doing. Now, techniques. What are they? Are they the same? And some things to think about. So first, we're going to start with aiming points. And aiming points are crucial. It's crucial to give our O-linemen landmarks, because landmarks really enforce muscle memory. As funny as it sounds, but they're almost ingrained into each other. And the reason why that is because if you're always working to the same aiming point, your footwork condenses. It becomes smaller, faster. It allows you to be able to just reinforce those habits so that it reinforces muscle memory without having to dedicate extra drills and things to it. So one of the things that I was taught by Dan Durazio when I worked with him before the BC Lions, but again when I was with the Lions and he was the O-line coach, he calls it the theory of 2/3. And what I mean by that is that we want to try to block the inside 2/3 of the defender, covering up the inside and encouraging the defender that if he's going to go anywhere, if there's an easier path for him to go, it's going to be outside, away from where we want him to go. We're protecting the ball through the inside out. When I reinforce that concept to my offensive linemen, I tell them to think the tip of their nose to the inside nipple of the defender. That basically gets them to a 2/3 relationship. Now, I touched on this before, but blocking the inside 2/3 is really because, again, 94 to 96% of inside zone, and that encompasses tight and mid zone, cuts back behind the backside guard. So it's really a backside B gap entry play. That's why when they first started introducing the concept, they called it rollback zone, because it rolled back behind the backside guard. Okay, so when we are teaching run blocking, and again, this doesn't matter whether it's a man scheme or what kind of zone scheme, but there's 3 phases to every run block. Our first phase is our first 2 steps into contact. And what that does is it establishes our aiming point and angle of attack on our defender, and it takes you into contact. So as we like to say, it's 3 points of contact with an uppercut punch. Nipples need to be nailed to our thigh pads with no hip roll. So what that means is that if we're looking at the picture in the background, this is Antonio Johnson. He spent some time with the Houston Texans. I think he's a very good offensive lineman. You can see that he's making contact with the defender with his face mask and a double-fisted uppercut. We call this hitting on the rise as well. And what I mean by that, you can see the angle of attack in his back is an upward trajectory, not like 45-degree angles. It's not 90 degrees, but he's hitting on an upward trajectory. That's going to vary player to player. So there's no hard, fast rule saying, okay, we want you at 48.6 degrees, and I'm going to get my protractor out and compass and make sure that we line this up so that you're always hitting that way. Everybody's body shape is going to be different. So hitting on the rise is more of a concept of maintaining good posture, keeping your head out of the block. And what I mean by head is not face, but keeping the top of your head out of the block. But we want to make contact with both of our fists and our beautiful, beautiful face. That's why we build those face masks into helmets, so that we can hit with them. Now, again, we want to capture that aiming point, that inside nipple. And what I try to tell my offensive linemen is we want our inside hand going into the inside armpit of that defender. It allows us to be able to control inside moves. So we throw an uppercut punch and try to clasp on that inside armpit. Our right hand, in this case, tries to go up underneath our chest plate in an uppercut punching motion. The theory is that we want to try to choke the defender with his own pads. We want to try to lift him out of his shoes. So we're coming low to high in that uppercut punch motion and trying to land that right hand kind of anywhere we can make contact, midline ideally on the chest plate. Phase 2 is always going to be your drive block section. Now again, no matter whether this is man concept or zone concept, it's always the same, in my opinion, it's always the same concept. It consists of small, powerful steps moving forward where we want to try to reestablish stagger with every step that we take, going from a right-handed stance to a left-handed stance to a right-handed stance, all the way back again. Now we want to try to take that defender on a 45-degree angle, roughly. And again, that's because we're attacking the inside nipple of the defender, and that's where that defender's momentum will take him. What's important to understand is that there still can't be any hip roll through the beginning of the drive block section. The drive block section can last from 2 steps to however long it's going to take. But there's only one thing that defines the drive block section. And what's important to understand is that it lasts as long as it takes until that defender takes 2 steps. The defender has to take 1 step back or to the side and then reestablish with the other foot. We have to readjust his momentum from going forward to going a different direction. It doesn't necessarily have to be backwards, but it can't be going forwards anymore. And that's the reason why you have to make him readjust his feet. When he readjusts his feet, then we can roll our hips and start our climb because his momentum isn't going forward. The reason why we get stalemates in the hole and we talk about, guys talk titty bumping and, just 2 guys standing up in the hole is because both the defender and the O-lineman have rolled their hips too early. And when you roll your hips and you take that explosion away from yourself, you've lost any sort of ability to be able to drive anywhere vertically, whether it's completely 100% vertically or whether it's at a 45-degree angle. You just don't have the power anymore. So remember, 2 steps. Phase 3 is what we call the climb and finish phase. Once the defender has taken his he's taken his 2 steps, we have to start our climb. Now the climb for a climb versus a defender is built of 2 violent movements happening at the same time. Whether it's the hips that trigger the hands or the hands that trigger the hips, you need to both have a violent hand movement and a violent hip movement at the same time. As you can see with Homer Simpson here down in the corner, we want to try to choke that defender with his pads by lifting him with our arms and our hips to pick the defender up, and we want to close all distance between the defender and myself by getting, what I say to my players is by getting dick to dick with the defender. We want to eliminate all distance because separation and distance in the run game is your enemy. Let's see if we can, hold on one sec. Okay, so this was a drill that I would do at Simon Fraser that developed and changed and progressed. I used to have guys standing with a bag, but to try to get the idea and to get the guys used to having somebody lean on them, I put a single man sled underneath the chute. So we talk about hitting on the rise, low pad level. I think that in this case, this player, his butt is a little bit too high. We want to drop his ass a little bit more. Hands, as you can see, there is still a bend in the arm, almost a 90-degree bend. He's going to go low to high with his hands, makes contact with 2 fists and his face mask, starts his drive block section, now accelerates his hips and climbs the defender. Now at this point in time, because he's finished, the finish is always going to be the same. We want to get that defender off of us. We want to shed him. We want to create separation again and hopefully dump him on his face. But the only time that can happen is when the running back has passed us. They've gone through us. So what we do is we finish once we've seen the running back clear. Again, aiming point, I used to teach a clap where the O-lineman would bring their hands together and clap down at the bottom so that I knew that they were bringing their hands in tight, and they're throwing their hands from low to high. Aaron, are there any questions thus far?
Nope, nothing in the chat. I remember the drill though, Coach.
Did I run this with you?
Yeah, I remember the clap for sure.
Yeah, when you get the clap, everybody remembers the clap. Okay, so hand placement. Again, we talked about squeezing the elbows, uppercut punch going low to high, and trying to make contact with that inside armpit, inside hand to the inside armpit, and your outside hand, or if we're going right, your right hand to the bottom of the chest plate. Again, we talked about separation being the enemy in the run game. Footwork for tight zone will vary from system to system and coach to coach. The keys to footwork, no matter the technique or that you believe in, I believe, is that we have to play in the cylinder. And what I mean by playing in the cylinder is that we always want to make sure that part of each of our foot is within the width of our shoulder pads. Now, it doesn't have to be both feet inside the shoulder pads because everybody's genetic makeup and the length of their instep and everything is different. But you want part of their foot to be within the frame of their shoulders with every step that they make. When we start going outside of that, we end up getting a unstable base because we're too wide. If we have an unstable base, we can't take powerful, controlled, fast steps. We're off balance. Our hips end up rolling at the wrong time, and it just puts us, in a lot of cases, it puts us on film for the very, very wrong reasons. The other thing is that we always need to make sure that with every step, we're reestablishing stagger. So that means that we're always trying to gain ground when we're taking steps. But the important part is that we don't want to get to a point where we're parallel. Again, when we're parallel, it's just like being too wide. We've created an unstable base. We want to try to play off of the insteps of our feet with the whole cleat in the ground. We don't want to play on our toes because playing on your toes means that there's less cleat and less foot in contact with the ground, which means that we have less surface area to put power into the ground. So we're more unstable. We're not as powerful because we only have a small surface area in which that we're trying to exert force into the ground. And really, when you think about it, especially out west, there's a thing called winter that rolls through here, and it happens at the most inopportune times. So when that ground starts to freeze and you're playing on your toes, your traction is terrible, and you end up slipping and sliding everywhere. So we want to try to play whole foot in the ground. Because I know that when you look at your offensive linemen, you naturally think, oh, they're a bunch of sprinters, but we're not sprinters. We're power athletes. We're like Clydesdales, not racehorses. So my thought process is I believe in what I call a brace step or a bucket step with our first step. The depth and width of that step varies on the alignment of the defender because we always want to set our, as with everything in our lives, our dick controls the aiming point of what we're going for. So why should it be any different in football? But we want to set that first step and our dick towards our aiming point, which again is that inside 2/3 of the defender, nose to the inside nipple. So again, depending on the width of that defender, that'll all depend on the width and the angle of that first step. So there's not always, I like to teach it as a 4 to 6 inch backwards and outside step, but again, it's going to vary from step or from alignment to alignment. Realistically, with that brace step, there's kind of no perfect step. There's a whole bunch of imperfect steps and wrong ones, but there's no perfect one. The brace step encourages and it plays to the percentage of the cutback in tight zone. It establishes and helps work that inside 2/3 relationship and forcing defenders on an angle. And the other thing that to go hand in hand with this, actually, and it doesn't matter necessarily the technical system, but if an lineman is doing it the right way, there is a lot of weight exchange on each step. If you slow things down a lot, you'll have a tendency to be able to see almost like a penguin going back and forth. They waddle a little bit, and that really allows you to be able to take those fast, aggressive, controlled steps is by slightly exchanging weight from foot to foot, or what we say, loading the foot. A couple of other drills that we can talk about or show you to accentuate these. Okay, so this is just another drill that we would do to practice footwork and aiming points. Again, this is elongated, of course, because we're going across or over top of a step up. But we always practice that. Again, our first step, as you can see, it sets our angle on that angle. Hands go down for everybody into that low position. The gentleman that's in the closest part of the screen, his name is Michael Couture. He's the starting center for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but one of the most talented kids that I've had a chance to work with. I've luckily worked with a bunch, but he, in this case, I think if you take a look at it, his hands are a little bit too elongated and too long. We don't want to be fully stretched out ever like that. So again, the practice with the first step and then the first two steps into contact. 1, 2. So again, as you can see by the first, hands have gone down. I get them to try to touch the bag to keep the posture low. As you can see with this first two steps, Mike has reestablished his stagger with the second step, giving him a good solid base. Again, reestablish a stagger. Now we go into the contact portion, low to high, again hitting on the rise. As he waddles through, you can see his body posture. I don't like that his head's down. We want him to pick his head up. We want his hands to be a little bit higher, more towards that 90-degree bend. Oops, sorry. Come on, PowerPoint, don't be that way. As you can see now, you can see that bend in his arms as he's going in for contact. Again, I'd like to see him a little bit more to the inside, 2/3 of that defender. And I'd like to see him to pick his head up. But again, he makes that contact and he doesn't climb and finish until the end. Let's take a look at our other one. This is just another look at it from another angle, but the same concept, same drill. 1, 2, and attack. You can also see here that Mike isn't doing a very good job of exchanging his weight. So if he went to take his third step here, it would be slow. But the same kind of concept, 1, 2, attack, hands go low to high, finish on climb. Okay. Now, schematically, again, we talked about it, but there are two major differences between tight zone and mid zone. And it has to do with how we treat the center and the backside guard and how they play it, both for 3 and 4 down fronts. In tight zone versus a 4 down front, the center will always work back to double team the nearest 2i. So if we're, as in the middle drawing, if we're talking about working versus a weak front, then he's always going to go to the play side and work a double team with the guard. But versus the first drawing to the left, We've got a 2-eye on the backside. So the center is going to work in body posture or commit his body presence to the backside 2-eye while keeping his eyes in the front side A gap and his hips in the front side A gap, just in case we get a 3-tech spike or the mic comes down. But he does work a high inside leg and tries to build a wall for the double team to come through by the backside guard. So again, we're always committing the center to the 2-eye. Now for mid-zone, again, we talked about it, but the center and the backside guard, we want to create more flow of the linebackers. So the center is going to brace drag or work towards the front side 3-tech. And then he's going to do two things. He's going to either push climb, which means that he's going to push the 3-tech out and then climb to the mic. Or he's going, if the 3-tech disappears and there's no immediate threat to his A gap, then he's going to do what we call rewind, which basically means body check backwards into the 2-eye and then work vertically onto the mic. So how does the center know what he's going to do on that play? The theory in zone is that for this case, if the 3-tech crosses the midline of the front side guard, then he's no longer the centers and he's not going to chase space to go get him. He becomes the guards and the guards alone. If there's any part of the 3-tech that's hanging backside, for instance, if he hasn't quite got all the way across the midline, if part of his shoulder pad is sticking back out, that's where the idea of a push climb comes in, where the center will push on that shoulder pad to try to clear it out and allow the guard to be able to tear that defender across his face and then climb to the second level. The other thing that can happen, again, is if that 3-tech disappears across the midline and there's no threat right now to the frontside A gap, the center is never necessarily in a hurry. So he can take time to be able to rewind onto that nose, which means he's just going to come backwards and body check that guy. And then climb to the mic. He's not going to try to use his hands. He's not going to put his hands on the backside defender. He's just going to add body presence in there and surprise that nose guard with having somebody coming back on. I hope that makes sense to everybody. It takes a lot of coaching to get there, but when it does get there, it pays off pretty well. Okay, so some clips on how we teach and handle double teams and kind of what they look like. Okay, so to set this drill up, what we're looking at is this, the gentleman with his hand in the dirt right now is the center. The guy that he's partnering up with is the left guard. And this is a tight zone example of a double team on a backside 2-eye. So the center in this case is what we're going to call he brace or 2 and throughs, meaning that he takes that brace step to nowhere with his right foot, but he goes straight vertical with his second step, trying to build a wall so that the nose guard doesn't cross his face. So the center is going to build a wall here, and what the guard does is he works a piggyback concept. And the reason why we call it a piggyback is because he gets depth and width and basically crawls up the back of the his partner that's building the wall to try to capture the inside nipple of the defender. So our center is trying to build the wall. As you can see, the guard is taking that deep drop step to try to get some depth and width and buy himself some time to get to that front side nipple. The center again is building that wall, and the guard comes around to try to capture. Now I've taught it different ways where we try to reach and rip with that front side or that backside hand. The only reason why I like to do that is because in that movement accelerates the footwork. You never want to be backside on this play, so you want the guard in this case to really try to reach to get front side to take over the block. Again, the center's building that wall. He's going to use a flipper to do that. I think that that's the best way to teach it. But once you guys get good enough with your hands, you can do a single arm punch. In an ideal world, that's the best way to go about it because it allows the center or whoever's building the wall to be able to get a little bit of separation so that when he's got to come off the block, he can press and create separation with his hand. It's a little harder with the flipper, but the flipper allows you to be able to exert more force, and you generally don't miss as many times as you do with a single hand. So again, he works his piggyback and comes through the other side. Okay. Okay, another look at it. Now this time the guard is building a wall and the center is working his piggyback. Now, in this case, I think the guard isn't building a wall fast enough. He's brace dragging. See how it's almost a lateral kick step, and he doesn't get into his building that wall and building a barricade for the center to come through until his fourth step. So I think he's taken that a little bit too far. But when he gets into it, he builds that wall and allows the center time to be able to come through and work to that front side pec to take that block over. The front side nipple, sorry. Double teams like twists need to be practiced every day if you want to be good at them. They're unfortunately not a natural thing and need to be worked on. So this will be the last clip on double teams, and I'll show you how I incorporated just a shoot into trying to keep these guys to stay low. Okay, again, so this is now done from a guard tackle standpoint where the offensive lineman closest to us is our tackle. The other gentleman is a guard, but it still holds true. The guy that's setting the wall takes a 2 and through step, builds that wall. As you can see it happening, our offensive lineman that's building the wall is actually crossing his feet over, which is definitely a no-no. He wants to go straight vertical with that step as opposed to trying to get width. But it's the same kind of concept. So build that wall, get some depth by the backside guy so we can work through to the front side nipple. Now that's the same on wide zone when we're, or sorry, tight zone when we're talking about any sort of double team. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be for tight zone or mid zone. So what I did was I cut up some clips of some good tight zone runs from when I was with the Lions for us to take a look at. We'll talk what we see from a technique standpoint, as well as aiming points and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, this is a version of what Montreal, they ran. This is what we call an up defense. This is just a 30 that they walked a bunch of guys up onto the line of scrimmage. So from a thought process standpoint, don't necessarily focus on the schematics of this because you might get confused. Let's just take a look at what we do from a technique standpoint. So I like to show Antonio because the right tackle, because I believe he's got good technique here. But what Antonio will do to initiate this block is he's going to take a check step onto the inside because that's what Coach Durazio liked to have just in case we get an inside slant. That's not necessarily what I believe in. I teach it a little bit different, but when you see them pick up their inside foot first, just so you are aware of what you're seeing. So Antonio goes quick little check step on the inside, then takes that aiming point with his first step. As you can see here, he's got that 45-degree angle. He's attacking the inside 2/3 of the defender. Let's see if he reestablishes stagger with the second step. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt because of the camera angle, but he's pretty close to. Now these off defenders are hard, but when he comes in, his hands, as you can see, he's getting his hands in tight. His body is hitting on the rise. He makes contact with his face mask. Hands are inside, so a double face mask and double fisted uppercut. Watch him climb the defender, see how he's trying to get dick to dick and he's trying to minimize his separation. And unfortunately, he loses him there at the end. But I want you to take a look at the difference in terms of width that he gets versus everybody else. So the right guard right now is Kirby Fabian, who I coached at the University of Calgary. Talented kid, had a lot of successful years in the CFL. But watch what he does when he comes off the ball. So his hands are in tight, but see how he gets that extension, and now his feet stop. He's just position blocking this defender, and there's no sort of movement being created. When Antonio makes contact, watch the defender as he moves his feet. That's another 3 yards worth of width that he's getting out of that. 3 yards might not sound like a lot, but in a game that happens when inches matter and it happens within tenths of seconds, it's a big deal. Okay, this is a 2-point play for us. This will look like a zone read, but this was a hard run because we have backside edge control. So this is Manny Arsenal coming across your screen, number 84. This is what I mean by backside edge control. We're going to give the backside defender, or the E-mole on the line of scrimmage, we're going to give him to somebody else. Not the O-line, but there's going to be somebody responsible for him. The keys to running any sort of tight zone or really any sort of run scheme whatsoever is that you have capped edges. meaning that the front side and the back side edges are spoken for. You don't want to have guys running freely all over the place, no matter what kind of athletes you have, in my opinion. So again, if you take a look at Antonio and Kirby right here, they're working a double team. So Antonio works that depth to a half cross to piggyback. He gets some depth and he's working with that front side nipple. What ends up happening here with Kirby is that they don't have anybody to work to. So Kirby bails on his trying to work to the second level and just focuses on working down. Now, if any of you have heard of an American play called duo, this is similar to a duo concept where it's not necessarily true zone. We're committing two double teams, or directed two double teams on the line of scrimmage. If we look to the back side of the line, Hunter Stewart, the left guard, he does a good job of building a wall here. This is what I mean by building a wall. And as that defender goes backside, we can see that Jovan Olafioye is reaching hard to try to capture that inside nipple so that we're walling that defender off. But again, Hunter doesn't necessarily have anybody to work to backside until Jovan comes over there. And because he's not in a hurry, he doesn't need to commit to that double or coming off of that double team because there's nobody threatening his gap. So we talk again about, and just in case I didn't, or I need to reiterate this, both mid-zone and tight zone can both be used for any of your RPOs or your zone read concepts. It's just schematically it changes. So again, this is just a basic zone read. We're reading here. I think. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is an RPO. So in theory, what Jonathan Jennings is reading is Chip Cox right here. So we're going to block him, and him. And this guy is who we're supposed to read. Now the problem is I think that our quarterback really effed this up because when you have a five-man box, in my opinion, you give the ball. But quarterbacks are quarterbacks. They make more money than me, so what do you mean? So again, we're taking that inside posture. We're going to block the inside 2/3 of the defender. We'll take a look at Antonio Johnson here. So again, he's attacking the inside 2/3 of the defender. You can see that he's hitting on the rise, which, to be honest with you, Aaron, I know that you're a tall fella, but he's a legitimate 6'7", and that can be tough for you long guys to hit on the rise and to have proper knee bend just because you're so friggin' long. But he plays pretty darn compact. His hands are in the inside. And if you notice the kind of width and stuff that he gets after he climbs his defender, he gets a lot of movement. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but it's a fair amount of movement. Let's take a look and see if Kirby does better on this play, the right guard. Again, he takes that brace step, so he's trying to set his angle towards attacking the inside 2/3 of the defender, nose to the inside nipple. See what happened with his footwork we don't like is he takes his brace step, and in theory, he should be attacking with that second step and closing off the inside gap, but he just brings it back to parallel, which means that he hasn't reestablished a stagger. And if we've looked at his now third step, he's so wide that he's not going to be able to take a very powerful and solid fourth step. See how he just brings it now back to parallel? That's what I mean by we want to reestablish stagger every time we take a step. And again, I think he's getting separation a little bit too early with his hands. Okay, again, we've got we're working in an RPO here, so that's the linebacker we're reading. See Antonio again, I think he stands up a little bit too early and it rolls his hips a little bit too early. But again, he's making contact with face mask, double fisted uppercut. He's nice and compact. If you look, he's rolling his hips a little bit too early, but he is doing it on the defender's first reestablishment of that step. So it is a little early, but it's not so early that he can't recover from it. And here's a good job by the left guard, Hunter Stewart here. He's staying nice and compact. Again, first step establishes that angle. Second step, see how he reestablishes his stagger. We got a good job going on there. Hunter's problem is definitely his hands. So he's a little late with his hands here, and they don't make contact quite where we want. But as you can see, he is hitting on the rise. His hips are rolling a little bit too early, you can see, because of how high his head is. But there isn't any separation, and he is playing the inside 2/3 of the defender. So he keeps his feet moving, and that's a pretty, in old school football, and traditionalists will say, oh, well, he didn't get any push-up field, so that's a crappy block. So let's take a look, and the reason why, I'll reinforce the reason why I like this kind of stuff is because let's say Hunter, his inside foot is, I don't know, let's say a yard off the hash mark. So let's see where, this is John Michael Cash, a pretty decent D lineman. I'd say he's probably 4 yards, 3 yards off the hash. Let's see where he ends up when the back crosses the line of scrimmage. So right there is where Chris Rainey would come off. So if you, Cash started here, ended up here, that's another 4 yards worth of movement. Now, if that was an old school drive block where we were just working upfield, sure, everybody would be bouncing on the tables and would be excited. But because it's a lateral push, guys don't get as much reward for it. Where when you take a look at it, the amount of displacement that this has created creates a massive amount of cutback space. And that's what we need to look for, is that cutback space. Okay, so if we look at Antonio here, again, he does a really good job. And anytime that you're trying to deal with your tackles or talking to your tackles, these blocks for these wide 7 and 9 techniques are extremely hard because the lineman can lose defensive ends in that kind of space. But see how he's taking small, fast steps? That allows him to be able to adjust so that he's not off balance if the defender moves. He comes in, hitting on the rise, hands are in tight, starting to climb his defender, and then he gets separation late. That's a shit ton of displacement, which is great. And in my opinion, exactly what we're looking for on most tight zone plays. Okay, now here is an example of mid-zone. We've got the center going front side. Now I want to pay attention to what we're talking about with this defender and how when the center leaves, how he tries to work hard to occupy this gap. So as our center leaves, he tries to work really hard down inside. And what does that do to the backside B gap? It widens the heck out of it. Now this is a zone read and our quarterback pulls the ball here, which he should. But if you take a look at the amount of cutback space, if this guy was just playing contain and working upfield, the amount of cutback space with him working front side so hard, I could have run through that backside lane for a positive gain, which wouldn't be pretty, but I could have got it done. And sometimes it just pays to be a freaky athlete. So this running back is Chris Rainey, who went to Florida, was drafted very high by the Pittsburgh Steelers, had some issues, but one of the most talented and neat individuals I've ever been around. You guys get a little more exposure to it on the East Coast, but those kids from Florida are some of the most special athletes that I've ever been around. Dumb as fence posts, but very, very special as far as athletes go. But again, you see we're working. Take a look again at Antonio. I don't mean to pick on him, but he does a good job. He's attacking the inside 2/3. I think he climbs the defender a little bit early, and see that separation with the hands, because he doesn't get into contact and he's got that separation. Watch how the defender sheds him to get back inside, and it gives him a chance to be able to make a play. Again, we don't want that separation until the running back has crossed the line of scrimmage. So I could keep going through film and stuff, but I think you guys have probably all seen it.
Thanks, Coach. I was just about to say, I know you can watch this stuff for hours, and I'd love to do it, but I think we're going to open it up to anybody who wants to ask a question right now. So I'm just going to unmute everybody's. Shoot. Just give me a sec, guys. Everyone can just unmute themselves if they'd like. If there's any questions, they're more than welcome now. Coach Blasetti's, again, I think we've all seen, very detailed in what he does.
The one thing quickly that I did wanted to talk about, and maybe you can think of some questions or what have you while I'm yammering on about this, but Aaron also wanted me to talk about developing mindset and stuff in offensive linemen, and being an ex-offensive lineman and coaching the position. I can tell you that in a lot of cases, we're the toughest group to develop a mental attitude. It takes time. What I've always tried to focus with anybody and all of the groups that I've coached is the attention to detail aspect. We have to do things the right way and have to take pride in doing things the right way, or nothing for the team goes right. We might not get the accolades and stuff that everybody hopes for, but the fact is that nothing can go right without us doing our jobs at an extremely high rate. And I've always believed that trying to incorporate a desire and to celebrate the desire for us to celebrate and focus on the little things. It's the little things that make a difference to an offensive lineman. It's the little things that mean the difference between converting a second and short and bringing on the punt team. But that's why I always break things down towards, well, we're talking about the angle and whether that's a good first step or not, whether our hand placement is in the right place, whether it's not. The faster that your kids can get to the point where they appreciate the detailed aspect of being an offensive lineman, the faster they're going to get better and take pride in what they do.
That's well said.
Because you can only beat in mistakes for so long.
That's right. Cool. Any questions, guys? There you go. You got one, Coach. I don't know if you can see it or not. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Would you say that tight zone would be more beneficial against a more athletic, smaller set of linebackers? And when you're going against a more slow, bulky linebacking core, would you say mid-zone? I like the thought process, but as much as we spend a lot of time focusing on what defenses give us, I think it's also very important to understand what we're working with as a group. It's almost more important that we know who we have versus what they have. Although it's super important to understand what they have. Even if you have a smaller, really athletic linebacking core, if you don't have...
Would you say a tight zone would be more beneficial against?
There goes.
It's okay. If you don't have necessarily the road graders up front, it doesn't matter how athletic or how light the linebackers are, because really, the truth be told, the difference is that you need to be able to really displace the 2-eye or the nose guard for tight zone to be able to expand that A-gap entry point. So if you've got road graders that can beat the hell out of that guy, then absolutely. It doesn't reflect necessarily on the linebacking core, in my opinion.
Yep. Fellas, anybody else?
Andre, was that your pretty face that I just saw?
Yeah, I got a quick question. I got two questions about the centers mostly.
Sure.
So I noticed on a lot of the film here that it was against a mug, like a head-up mug linebacker. How exactly would you coach the technique for a center having to elevate to straight away to a mug versus like the normal brace working up to it?
I actually do both. I still do brace it, and for mid-zone, I'll still have a brace drag it as a concept, unless that guy is presenting an immediate threat. Just because he's a mug doesn't necessarily mean he's challenging your gap. So in theory, if you brace or you brace drag, it still buys you enough time to be able to figure out what that guy's doing. Now, the unfortunate part is your eyes wouldn't be on the 3 in that case. They have to be on the mug, but your body will still go into the A gap.
And then second question, you're talking about the rewind aspect there. I'm not necessarily familiar with that type of block. What do you have for footwork? Is it more like a flat step back to body check? Okay.
So if you imagine a brace drag as kick foot post in a straight line, your rewind is just coming backwards with that post foot, basically just like a body check backwards. Okay. If you don't hit anything, that's okay. You're just creating body presence back in the backside A gap if you're a center, or when guards do it versus a 30 front back into the nose or back into the backside 4-eye or 5 tech. So it's really just rewinding. And usually what ends up happening when a player rewinds is he gets a ton of contact back on that nose guard because he's trying to fill that gap that's been vacated so fast that he really gets stood up. And then guys for a ride.
And in terms of like having that rewind, is there an aspect of that might ruin the cutback lane just because if you knock him into that B gap, or no?
It can, but only if that center or whoever's come back so hard that it's like you wound that guy all the way into the backside B gap, which usually doesn't happen. A good rewind, what it ends up doing is with that backside step, it just kind of pops him up and stops his momentum from going into the gap. And actually what it ends up doing is it allows the guard to get back downhill on him, and we get more vertical press as opposed to the lateral momentum.
Thanks.
Yep. Mr. Shepard, Coach, do you prefer sticking to one type of zone and trying to get really good at it during the season, or do you like to mix it up? That is a spectacular question, Coach, and I firmly believe that less is better when you're teaching, because we are all a victim of never having enough time to be able to teach, whether it's technique or schematics. Being an O-line coach, we're always, give me 5 more minutes of NB, give me 5 more minutes of insertion. There's always more time, and we always fill it with more time, but we don't necessarily get enough time to coach it. I firmly believe as long as you're good at it, you can coach as many things as you want, but be very conscious and do a lot of self-study that being average at 4 things is not as good as being really good at 2 things. Like for instance, this 2016 with the Lions, all we ran was tight zone and wide zone, and we led the league in rushing. So we were super good at 2 things, and that's it. So I don't necessarily think that you need to run gap scheme or counters and a tight zone and a mid zone and a wide zone to be able to be dynamic. I think you get dynamic by changing up your formations, adding in some motion. I think that you can be very, very simple and keep things very, very simple for your guys up front, but still being extremely dynamic by adding in those other things. And if there's nothing else, guys, if you don't have anything right now, I know that Aaron has all of my contact information, and any of you are welcome to reach out at any point in time with some questions. If I can, I don't have all the answers, and I don't pretend to, but I might be able to see something maybe in a different light that might help you look at things a different way, or give you a different kind of thought process on it. It never hurts to have a clean set of eyes look at something. So any of you are welcome to. Oh, sorry. Coach just asked, what are your thoughts on duo? I freaking love it. I think duo is a spectacular play. And the reason why I love it is because nobody runs it in Canada. I think it gives the defense so many challenges, and it allows you to be. And it's, to be honest with you, although there's a lot of moving parts, there's not a lot of difference between that and the tight zone concept. So it allows you to be able to teach a new concept without getting completely out of the realm of what you normally do. So if you're looking at duo, I strongly encourage to go after it if you can coach it. It's a great play.
Yeah. Awesome. Guys, anything else? I don't want to keep Coach Blasetti too long. I thought that was fantastic. Some really good stuff there. And like he said, he's incredibly easy to reach out to. Like, I don't know, add him on Facebook. You can get his email address. Easy enough to hit him up. Anybody else?
I firmly believe, guys, that we're kind of all in this together. And O-line and run game is some of the toughest stuff to teach in our sports, and the more minds that you have working together to make football across this country better, the better off we're all going to be in the long run, and it's better for the sport. So
That's right.
I don't care about sharing playbooks and stuff like that. Oh, sorry, there's one other question that just came in. What would you recommend if you have a great athletes in the backfield, however, lack of offensive linemen? That is always tough. I think in that case, gap scheme and a lot of perimeter play is important. So if you can, get if your guys can run it all, then a lot of tosses and stuff that attacks the edges. I wouldn't say wide zone, because wide zone, in my opinion, you can do an entire clinic on wide zone, but wide zone, in my opinion, it's the most dynamic play and gives you the most answers, but it comes up with the most questions, and it's the hardest thing to coach.
Yeah.
So things like tosses and perimeter play and gap scheme, I would say, if you don't have great offensive linemen, but they can move, if you can get them into space and get a hat on a hat, having a really good athlete in the backfield allows you to be able to work. If you can get them into space, get them into space.
Okay. Thanks, Coach.
Yeah.
Right on, guys.
Sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if there's any more questions, again, I don't see anything more typed into the group chat here. But, Coach, I'll let you get the last few words, and then everybody else can just say thanks and carry on.
Well, again, guys, I appreciate it. Appreciate you listening to me for like an hour and a half, ramble on. Sometimes I get sidetracked, but as I'm sure all of you guys are, I'm extremely passionate about the sport in our country, and trying to make it better from coast to coast. And this is I've done a couple of things like these for Football Alberta, and for some friends down south and stuff like that. And the sharing of knowledge is important for all of us to get better. So any questions that you have, never ever hesitate to reach out. I'll do my best to get back to you in a relatively fast manner, but yeah, all you can do is, and I try to instill this and preach this message to everybody that I talk about, but as football coaches, we are a community. One of the things that I really learned about in the NCAA was coaches take care of each other. We have to learn from each other. We have to take care of each other. We have to try to make each other better and support each other. It's not about, as much as it's a dick measuring contest because we all want to win, it's about making each other better. So shake each other's hands. Don't have conversations with each other right before you play. It's a community. We're all in this for the same reasons, and the more that we can try to make each other better, the better off we're all going to be. So that's all I got. And Aaron has all my contact info. If you have any questions at any point in time, never hesitate to reach out.
That's great. Thanks, Coach.
Everybody stay healthy. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Andre, good to see you. Aaron, good to see you. Take care, guys.
Good.
Thanks again, Coach. That was awesome.
Anytime, Aaron. I hope that guys got stuff out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, anytime you have any questions or anything, man.
Yeah, of course.
You take care of your family and you stay safe.
Yeah, we'll do. You too, buddy.
Talk soon.
Thanks, man. How you doing, Dre?
I'm good, Aaron. How you doing?
Good, man. Good.
Yeah.
Are you back? Are you back home now, or are you in Nova Scotia still?
I came back home just because I had nowhere to go in, like apartment-wise. I don't want to just hang out there all day, so I just rather stay at the old house there. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm in your neck of the woods. I'm in Dieppe.
Oh, you're Dieppe, eh? Yeah.
You're Dieppe.
Yeah. I was close to DF, but like still bunked it. Can't
Okay.
act like I'm a DF guy,
Fair enough. I don't know. I just assumed French guy
Yeah.
from Moncton.
Oh yeah, there's the French high school bunked it too. So
How'd school go?
good, man. Yeah, it's been good. The second year was a lot. I kind of figured it out a little bit more, so it's been good.
Sweet.
Yeah, still tough, but it was weird. It's weird with it being all online at the end here, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's super weird.
No
Man,
kidding.
so.
Yeah, that's like I can't imagine the amount of reading you must have to do with it not being in class and then just being law overall.
Yeah, man. Oh, it's crazy. 100+ pages a night. So.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's been tough, man.
Just all thrilling reads, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, like there's tons of bullshit, man. It's so bad. Like you read some of the cases, and you're like, man, what am I even reading? Like we read this thing. It was like this huge legislation passed about butter and stuff like that. It's just like, bro, like what are we reading anyway? Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, man.
Are you heading back to Europe this year? Is that your plan, or?
No, I just went there for shits and gigs there that 1 year to have fun, and I experienced it and had a good time. But I had a job with a law firm in Halifax, but I'm not sure if I don't think it's gonna go this summer just because of all this shit. So unfortunately, yeah, man. But hey, it is what it is.
Literally nothing is the way it should be right now. You know what I mean? Like,
brutal, absolutely brutal. Congrats on getting the job with Football New Brunswick, man. It's a good gig for you.
Yeah, man. It's been really good so far, honestly. Like, I mean, they're still paying me during COVID and trying to build the sport a little bit, pick up where Hops left off a little bit. And families, it's fun to be back here. So
exactly, man. And like, it's perfect fit for you too, I think, like in terms of them wanting a guy who knows football and stuff. So it works out well.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, no worries.
Yeah. If you're around here in the next couple of years, I'll 100% be reaching out to you. I don't know if it's plans are or not, but
I'm not sure. I'll probably be in Nova Scotia, but you never know. But hey,
just like Bowen, you and Bowen coaching Team Nova Scotia.
I don't know about Team Nova Scotia. I don't know if I could be that unfaithful to the boys, so I'm not sure. But yeah, man.
I appreciate that, Jay. You're the man.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Take it easy.
All right, man. We'll catch you later.
Okay, bye.
See you, bud.